Good evening, and we welcome you back to our coverage. Howard K. Smith, Harry Reasoner, and I'm Barbara Walters. And at this point, let us give you both the popular and the electoral vote. With 4% of the precincts reporting in nationally, the popular vote has Jimmy Carter with about 1.5 million votes and 52%, and Gerald Ford with about 1,400,000 and 48%. But of course, the real count, where it matters, is in the electoral vote. 270 needed to win, and Ford has 13, Carter has 61. That is not surprising, since most of the states that have come in have been southern states, and they have been, it was predicted earlier that they would probably go for Jimmy Carter. There are some important states which will be coming in, we hope, fairly soon, where polls have closed in Ohio and in Illinois, and those are very important states to see which way things will go. And also in Mississippi, because Mississippi could still go either way. That's a very close state and southern state.
You're ignoring my state of Connecticut, where the polls presumably the polls were closed about 1.5 minutes ago.
But I care about your state of Connecticut, because yours may be the only state with a woman senator.
Well, it's not likely, but it's possible. It already has the only woman governor. So but in any event, it's a state that could be extremely significant, a normally Democratic state, where this year, if it does not go Democratic, the Democratic National Committee will start to worry.
You know, I don't think we've given enough attention to the state of Florida. It's the 9th biggest state in the Union in terms of population. It's quite a prize for Carter to get 17 electoral votes, more than any of the states we've projected so far. And it was denominated by Jimmy Carter as one of his 3 vital battlegrounds in the South: Virginia, Texas, and Florida. And he won it.
Except that it was, I mean, if one kept reading how things were going, it was expected to go to Carter. President Ford had tried to make inroads here. He really hadn't seemed to be able to. Of course, Florida was a state that Jimmy Carter took away from George Wallace, and that was a decisive factor for him in the South. In winning his projected victory in Florida, Jimmy Carter won all parts of the states except the suburbs, and usually this is again expected, and who knows, that the suburban areas might more likely go for Ford, and the cities more Democratic would go for Carter. The voter turnout in Florida appears to be about the same as it was in 1972. And Carter's strongest supports in Florida came from blacks. That's a very important vote in all elections, particularly in this, and they gave him 90% of their support. So if it had gone for Ford, it would have been a great victory for Ford, but it is not really a surprise that it went for Carter.
I think you may have an answer already to the question of whether that incident at Jimmy Carter's church on Sunday, what it did to his black support, which is so important to him. You said 90% in Florida. In South Carolina, where we projected Jimmy Carter the winner, again, 90% of the black vote went for Carter, and that's where he won, in the rural vote.
I have a result here of great interest, if I may read it. The polls in Plains, Georgia have closed, and the vote is 481 for Carter to 99 for Gerald Ford. Name me those 99, and I will name you 99 people who will not be allowed to house their peanuts in Jimmy Carter.
I have been in Plains, Georgia, and there are not 600 people. There's some kind of chicanery.
No, the chicanery is the district in which Plains is the metropolis.
Well, that's why we have a secret ballot, so you never know who those 99 people are. You know, of all of the elections, the House, the Senate, the governor, the president, it is only in the House that all 435 members every 2 years are up for election or re-election. A number of congressmen running for re-election this year have been involved in scandals, which makes for juicy reading, but it doesn't necessarily bring out the votes. But Don Farmas, who's covering the House for us, says that it appears that at least one of them has regained a seat, and I want to know which one.
Barbara, it would appear that the first man for whom we have a result tonight who's been involved in a scandal, the election has gone to the man who was in fact involved in the scandal, and that's no surprise because he had no opposition, at least no Republican opposition. Robert Sykes, age 70, from the Pensacola, Panama City area of Florida, has won easily with nobody really fighting against him. The interesting thing about Sykes, I think, is that he was actually reprimanded by the House of Representatives, a rare fact indeed. It never happens. It happened to Robert Sykes, reprimanded for some financial problems that he was having. It didn't seem to matter. He won his primary election by 54,000 votes. This was the only threat to his long and, I suppose, prominent career in the House of Representatives. He's been there since 1940. The people of his district have spoken, and Robert Sykes is returning to Congress for what would be his 19th term. There are others involved in this. I suppose it all started with Watergate. Never before have we been so interested in the private lives of people who represent us in Washington. I guess Wilbur Mills was one of the first. He's gone now from the House. He was the granddaddy of all the sex scandals, Wilbur Mills and the Argentine firecracker. Mills has rehabilitated himself, and he is retiring from the House now in good spirits and with the respect of his colleagues. Another man, less so, I suppose, is Wayne Hayes, who has retired and resigned and will no longer be in the House of Representatives. He was this year's major scandal. One we'll be looking at tonight in Utah. In the 2nd District there is Alan Howe. He was convicted of soliciting prostitutes. He's expected to lose and perhaps damage some of the other Democrats who are running in other races in the state of Utah. We'll be watching those scandal-ridden races for you and reporting on them later on this evening. Harry?
We're going to be keeping track, a running total during the night of the electoral totals as ABC News is able to project them state by state. Right now, Jimmy Carter has 6 states in his column in what we call the winning lineup board: Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, South Carolina, West Virginia. None of them any substantial surprise, but Florida at least very good news for him. So far, President Ford, as expected in the early part of the evening, is running way behind in projected electoral votes. He has only one state, Indiana, which has given him 13 electoral votes. But as we have noted, not only are these projections, but they are projections from the part of the country that was expected to go for Jimmy Carter. As Lou Harris noted earlier, in 1960, in the first couple of hours, it looked like a Kennedy landslide, and we were all up the next morning trying to figure out who had won. We've had a couple of significant results in among the 14 races for governor. I'd like to hear about them from Ann Compton.
Harry, ABC has 2 projections to make now. First of all, in Illinois. No surprise at all, the Republican James Thompson is projected by ABC News to win by a comfortable margin over Michael Howlett, a state official. A strong Democrat, but one who just seemed to be run over by Thompson's $2 million campaign. Very little of the vote in so far, but Thompson is expected to run well ahead, and in fact his coattails are expected to help President Ford. It was a hot race. In fact, the chairman of the State Board of Elections in Illinois predicts that the voting could go as high as 79%, a record. Thompson was hoping to become the first governor ever elected with a 1 million vote margin, but that will have to wait for later results. Another projection by ABC News in North Carolina. This time it is a Democrat, Lieutenant Governor James Hunt, now projected by ABC News to win with a comfortable margin over David Flaherty, a Republican, a former member of the cabinet of the current Republican governor of North Carolina, that is James Holshouser. You know, they used to say that North Carolina's Democratic Party was all wings and no body. It had problems for several years, but Hunt has the luxury of running with a very unified Democratic Party, and that is supposed to be helping Jimmy Carter in North Carolina this year, too. And that's the 2 projections from the governor's desk.
Thank you, Ann. We want to give you the popular vote now, and of course it has been said that this is an election in which one candidate could win the popular vote and still lose the electoral vote and therefore lose the election. But the popular vote, with 5% of the precincts reporting in, Carter with 1,790,000 votes and 52%, and Ford with 48% and 1,645,000 votes. So that's the way it looks now, but as we've said, it still is fairly close in the popular vote. Well, coming up next, we're going to have more of our election coverage. We're going to pause right now for this. There are many states that are too close to call, and we're watching all of the states with great interest, but some of these states in which it's very close are of particular interest. One in the South is Mississippi, and that has been a battleground state for Ford, and it will be extremely interesting to see what might turn out there. 1% of the vote, and it's 67% for Carter and 31% for Ford. 7 electoral votes. But what is interesting in this state, this is a toss-up, but it represents the dilemma that a good deal of the South had to face. That is that Mississippi has not voted for the Democratic presidential candidate since 1956. But Jimmy Carter is a Southerner. And which way does the state go? With its Southern sentiments or with its Republican tradition? And we will see when we know whom the state has finally voted for. The black vote could be particularly important here because it's expected that the black vote will go for Carter. And if it's a strong black vote, that could help him. But keep your eye on Mississippi because that's one of the southern states that Ford has been hoping for. And if he loses it, it's a disappointment. There are other states which also present this kind of conflict, and Harry and Howard of theirs.
One of those states that presents exactly the same kind of a problem and opportunity for Gerald Ford is North Carolina, which early in the campaign was regarded as solid for Carter, but as the election day neared, was thought to be very close. North Carolina has not voted for a Democrat since 1964, when it did vote for Lyndon Johnson. On the other hand, this year it returned to the Democratic column in the governor's list, and it may very possibly go for Carter. At the moment, 3% of North Carolina's precincts are in. Jimmy Carter is holding a 59 to 41% lead, but that counted vote doesn't mean much, and there are not enough of ABC's key precincts in to make a judgment on how North Carolina will go tonight.
Harry, I have one state that is not too close to call, Tennessee. ABC News projects that Jimmy Carter will carry the state of Tennessee. That is not, he will carry it by a comfortable margin. It is no surprise because in the primaries, Tennessee gave Jimmy Carter his second biggest ratio of the vote. Two states in the Middle West that we're watching very closely because they could be decisive. One is Illinois, the fourth largest state in the Union. And in Illinois at present, the raw vote is 6,600 for Carter to 5,300 for Ford. Means absolutely nothing because fewer than one precinct has reported in. In Ohio, a little bit more, 1% of the precincts have reported in, and Ford is ahead with 54,000 votes to Carter's 42,000. In Cleveland, one of the two men who is fighting a very dramatic battle for the United States Senate, Howard Metzenbaum, is standing by. Metzenbaum faces Senator Robert Taft Jr. tonight, and Metzenbaum is going to be interviewed by ABC's Ron Miller. We go now to Cleveland.
Mr. Metzenbaum, we're told that the people are still waiting in line to vote here in Cleveland. It's a record turnout of voters, apparently. I would think you're heartened.
I am heartened. We wanted a large turnout, and we don't know exactly what that means, but this is certainly what we felt was in our best interest, to have the greatest number of people go out to the polls, and we also think it's good for democracy to have everybody get out to vote, whatever the result may be.
I believe Howard has a question for you, Mr. Metzenbaum.
Mr. Metzenbaum, you've lost 2 out of 3 races for the Senate now, and then once you were appointed to the Senate when William Saxby decided to become Attorney General. Are you more confident tonight that you're going to win?
I'm not confident. I'm hopeful. I'm anxiously waiting for the returns to come in. I think that I have a good chance to win, but I'll just wait until the results are announced before I start indicating any confidence. I addressed myself to what I consider to be the economic issues in this campaign, and I think I did get through to the people of Ohio what I consider to really to be the what was involved on election day, and I think that it may help my effort. We'll wait and see a little bit. We'll know in a couple of hours.
Mr. Metzenbaum, the issue that dogs you in the other 2 races was a personal one about your income as a businessman, a millionaire businessman. Do you think you've licked that now?
Well, it makes it a little bit easier when you're running against another millionaire. Only in this case, he inherited his and I earned mine. I didn't hear much of that during this campaign, and I guess many of the people to whom I spoke, many of the groups to whom I spoke, sort of indicated that it's going to be a millionaire in the United States Senate. There ought to be one of them who's with the people, and I think I'm that kind of person.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Metzenbaum. We'll watch with great interest, and the whole nation will, the outcome of that particular dramatic Senate race. Harry?
And we've got more word on the Senate, which we're going to get right now from a non-millionaire named Frank Reynolds.
Yes, but I'm going to talk about a millionaire, Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts. Just to continue along the same line, ABC News now projects, to the surprise of absolutely no one in the United States of America, that Senator Edward Kennedy will be reelected by a wide margin over his Republican opponent, Michael Robertson. The last time Senator Kennedy won, it was in the 80% bracket. We don't know how big it's going to be this time, but it is no surprise. And also another projection from an eastern state, and again, this one is not going to raise any eyebrows. Senator Harrison Pete Williams of New Jersey, according to ABC News, will be the victor in his race over David Norcross, a man who waged a good fight, but most of the people in New Jersey had never heard of him until very shortly before the campaign came to an end. So those are the two projections that we have right now. Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts and Senator Williams of New Jersey, both Democrats. I was interested to hear Howard Metzenbaum being cautious there a moment ago and talking about his prospects for the Senate. He's got to wait for the returns to come in from Cuyahoga County, which is the area around Cleveland there. And if he can come out of Cuyahoga County with more than 100 and 150,000 votes, actually, he'll be in pretty good shape because he'll have to offset the expected Republican gains by Senator Taft, the incumbent, in Cincinnati and Columbus. We had a report just a moment ago from Ohio that 30% of key precincts are now in, and is that the trend is toward the Democrat, Metzenbaum, but it is still too close to call. Barbara?
Thank you, Frank. We'll just bring you up to date now. The electoral votes, 270 needed. At this point, Jimmy Carter has 71 electoral votes, and Gerald Ford has 13 electoral votes. In the popular race, it's 6% of the precincts reporting in nationally, and Carter has 53% of the vote to Ford's 47% of the vote. But of course, it is the electoral vote that is the count that's needed, and it's the electoral vote that sweeps you or dusts you or brings you into the White House. In addition to the various races that we've been reporting on, president and senator and governor and so forth, a great many states have referendum that can really affect not only what happens in their states, but what happens in other states. In Massachusetts, for example, there is the severest referendum on gun control, which would prohibit all civilians from owning guns. And if this passes, this could have influence on other states. There are many states that have referendums about nuclear power. Atlantic City may make a difference to all of New Jersey, because New Jersey is going to vote on whether Atlantic City can have gambling or not, and that could make a tremendous difference to the state. What are some of the others that you might have that you recall from your states?
Well, they've got things all across the country. A number of states are voting on whether or not to limit expansion of nuclear power, which could be a very serious or a very important change in the way the country's going. 5 states are voting on whether or not to require that bottles and cans be returnable for some kind of a deposit or to be recollectible. A very touchy economic issue, because there are more jobs involved in non-returnable drink containers, but the ecology is on the side of returnable ones. And it's one of the first times that you've been able to get a popular decision on it. In the past, only Oregon, I think, has had a law saying you had to have returnable bottles. Now tonight, 5 other states will decide.
The ERA is a subject that's coming up in the referendum, not in the election. 2 states are involved with the ERA. Massachusetts is going to decide whether or not there should be a state ERA bill passed, and Colorado has on their proposition that the ERA, state ERA, could be rescinded. And a very important referendum in California, that which is known as Proposition 14, and which has to do with the unionizing of workers on farms, and that's been an extremely controversial issue. So all over the country there are these things to take a look at, as well as the individual races of the people.
Barbara, the referendum I'm most interested in is a single state which has decided to let the people decide what the tax limit they pay shall be.
Colorado.
That's Colorado. Yes, you can't raise any state, local, or federal taxes, it said, without the people agreeing to. This is everything from school lunches, I guess, up to what you pay someone. This is very important, and we're going to stop discussing referendums to tell you about the state of New Jersey, one of the Big Ten states, extremely important. New Jersey has gone to Gerald Ford. It's been close. There are 17 electoral votes. New Jersey to Gerald Ford. This is one of the states that both the candidates were striving for. There had been some thought that Jimmy Carter might be hurt there because the Democratic governor, Byrne, is unpopular, and recently had a state income tax that was unpopular. On the other hand, there were just as many people who would tell you that Gerald Ford wasn't going to get it. But it's important that one of the states that people were looking at, New Jersey, 17 electoral votes to Ford. And we will have much more of this. The states are going to be coming in, and we'll bring you background as well as the projections. That's the National Election Night Story at 22 minutes after the hour.